Welcome to The Cusp, a podcast that tries to give you the straight dope on what's actually happening with artificial intelligence, how jobs are changing, and what that means for education and workforce development. I'm Paul Fain, editor of the Job Newsletter and co-founder of WorkShift. Thanks for listening. Salesforce is an ambitious heavyweight on artificial intelligence, and the company's philanthropic arm is focused on partnering with schools and nonprofits to help students develop job-ready, tech-forward skills. That means Ron Smith, VP of Philanthropy at Salesforce, who's overseen more than $225 million in giving, has a great window into AI's rapid integration into education. In our interview, Smith shared his take on how to be thoughtful about the tech's deployment to ensure that students aren't getting left behind. I also chatted with Ellie Bertani for this episode. Bertani is president and CEO of the GitLab Foundation, which seeks to help people grow their lifetime earnings through education, training, access to opportunities, and systems change. Bertani talked with me about the foundation's data-based philanthropic philosophy with AI and economic mobility. She also shared an optimistic vision for the future with concrete suggestions about how to get there. As always, thanks for listening. Ron Smith, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
So obviously Salesforce and its philanthropic arm is heavily engaged in all the things we care about in this show. I just want to get a sense of the general thrust, what problems you're trying to solve, what are kind of most top of mind urgent issues for you right in this moment.
So when we think about what we're looking at in the world in our philanthropic work, we really think about how are we supporting our public education system, our nonprofit organizations, as they think about the areas where we work and live, and we have focus areas like San Francisco and Oakland, New York, Chicago, and Indianapolis. How are we supporting the young people and the adults in the education space as they prepare for this future related to AI? What that means, we're looking at it's reskilling, retraining, providing opportunities for them to get the tools that they need to have and understand what the future could potentially hold. We really have emphasized in our giving around computer science, mathematics, and now AI. So within that scope, thinking about the access to college support, thinking about first generation students and how they need additional support. So when you think about those curriculum areas, the populations we're looking to serve, and the pipeline to get to a career opportunity, how are we using our dollars, again, with those public education systems and with those nonprofits to help the young person on their journey? And we think of it in a simple phrase. We're tiny pieces of a stepping stone. And at the end of those pieces, as you put them all together, were they a part of a young person's life journey to get a career opportunity? And now in the world that we've all jumped into at the highest level of AI, how are we supporting those young people? How are we supporting the adults in the system? Adults being any person who walks into a classroom to support a young person, aides, teachers, principals, counselors, superintendents. In some cases, it could be community members and parents. How are we partnering, working alongside with, and really thinking about being a piece of the journey and this long journey as young people are preparing for their future?
Good stuff. Can you give me a sense of kind of the urgency here, how big of a concern you all feel this is? It feels like K-12, higher ed, starting to move pretty seriously on the AI fluency, AI tools front. Just from your broad vantage point, I'm wondering how much progress have we made and how concerned are you of students getting left behind?
So it's two parts. I think it's a sense of urgency at the fact that it's here and it's not going away. Sometimes you in education, you hear often things come in one day, they're gone. So this around AI, it's here to stay. It is the best way I've been explaining it to people. It was when I was younger and I'm in grad school, my teacher credential program, and they taught us how to make an email. And then you get the .AOL, and there are only those 5 people around you who built it you could send it to because no one else had built it yet. That is what AI is now. AI is who is using it, who's using the tool, because I also remember this. Young people have been using the AI tools already. They're already engaged. But how are the rest of the individuals, the adults, the system, people in the system, how are they engaged? So that's where it's actually moving at a faster pace. It's going on. It's actually happening. And basically the different sectors are being brought into what young people have been doing and the younger age people have been doing for a while. The other side of that, and I think this is where I think of the difference between major concern, is what about those populations that don't necessarily have access to internet or technology at that level, that aren't always really interacting with the AI tools that might not, because of the system and from the education system having focuses on budget and teacher shortages and learning loss and all these different things, they might not emphasize AI as much. Does that now create another divide where those populations and young people, and historically across the United States have been African American, Latinx, and young women, they're getting even more left behind and pushed behind, already behind in many academic areas, already behind in some of the access to opportunity areas. Does this now create another gap that adds another layer to prevent them from having the career success? So it's really a double-edged sword. The system is moving, it's getting activated. They're having conversations, they're creating plans, they're thinking about ways of going forward. So that's going to happen and it's not going away. What happens to the young people if they then are not getting that correct? And everyone, there's no such thing as a one size fits all model. It's impossible. It doesn't work. Everyone will see that. So then how are we intentionally making sure that we're keeping a lens and an eye out to those populations that already are behind me? I think that's when you think about policymakers, when you think about leaders in the education system, when you think about tech leaders or just leaders in general, they have to have that lens. Because if you don't have that lens, just and the push to go forward, you automatically just start forgetting about those details. And young people can't be a detail. They have to be part of the overall process of progress that the system is taking to go forward.
As you were talking, I was thinking about a previous guest on the show, Anish Raman from LinkedIn. He had a very optimistic viewpoint of the technology's potential with underserved populations and education and frontline workers. And I don't mean it was unrealistically optimistic. I was really inspired by some of what he said. Just that the tools have the potential to really help in a lot of ways, coaching, all those things. But, when you think about, we've all seen this movie before, new technologies hit, who gets it, who doesn't, right? Like the elite higher education students, they're going to get it, of course. Community college students, no, lesser resource schools, et cetera. I mean, where do you fall on that continuum of optimism concern?
I guess optimistically pessimistic. My challenge is you can present anything and it can be the best thing out. But if you don't change the mind shift and the way people think about things, if you don't properly train and integrate, and if you aren't preparing the young people to see the value of this tool and how it can help them and not hinder them, how it adds to their efficiency, how it gives them time, doesn't take time, how it's already, in many young people's cases, really just what you're using already. It's just an accelerated event and just you enhancing it. If you don't change the narrative, what happens is it just, to your point, it just becomes another thing, another tech tool on the side that, put it on the shelf as things that were introduced. Then that's where the gap comes in, we were just talking about. So I'm optimistic for the point that it's there and the opportunity and the potential is there. I'm concerned. Let me stop, not say pessimistic. I'm concerned that leaders in a space, decision makers, won't prioritize, accountability. They won't prioritize access and opportunity, and they won't prioritize the training and resources needed to bring everyone up. I was talking to a partner saying there just needs to be a baseline where everyone understands AI 101. Everyone has to understand this 100%.
Yep.
And if you get that, then you can scaffold it. Let's be clear. Everyone's not going to accelerate to a level 10. You'll have some people level 2, 6, 7, whatever it might be. But you need to have a baseline for everyone to move up. And the best way I can explain it is, if you pick up a phone, people will go to Google in a heartbeat. They know it. It's in songs, it's in jokes. It's just part of the fabric of the world for everyone. It just is. And if you were to say that 10, 15 years ago, nobody would have said that. No, but it took understanding. And then as more people bought in, other people started saying, use this and do this. And then it just became the fabric of getting into the internet and using your phone and understanding the resource and how that resource was powerful and able to help you. AI is that, it's the enhancement of the search. It's the building of the individual component. And I think of it as, imagine that young person or that adult who now has a companion, for lack of a better term, that they can work with, that can help them process their thoughts, that can interact, that can give them feedback. Because maybe they don't have an adult in their life who can do that. Maybe they don't have a person they trust that can process their thoughts and give them back honesty. Now, there's things about ethical use. There's things about biases that the technology side has to address. But the power, potential of that is amazing because there are people with questions of all ages that if you can have someone that can interact and then say, hey, I've given you all this information. Now you should, here are some other resources to go look into. Try this, and that'll help deepen even more what our conversation's about. And that's where we are in 2024 is accelerated over 2014, 2004, and then the 90s and the four. We're at a space that we can really start to move faster because we have these access points. And again, it goes back to what you're saying when we're thinking about opportunities and concerns. It's just, are we intentional to address the concerns? Because we know they're there. That's the
Yeah.
key. You know it's there. You know you need to say something. And you know you have to do something about it. So let's address it. Let's not just throw it out there and then be like, oops, oh, let's try to figure out the problem now. No, you know what? Let's do it all at the same time. It might slow it down a little bit. And that's the thing I think sometimes concerns people with new things is, if I don't want to go too slow, we should go fast. So you can still go fast because it's just innate. It's going to be fast because of how the world works and where it is in the world. But you can make decisions that are a little more strategic so you don't get caught on the back end making bad decisions.
Great points. The intentionality piece is something that's rising to the surface often in my reporting. And again, I feel like things are changing fast. I mean, we've all seen some of the numbers from educators, higher ed, K-12. I'm talking about the adults, not the students, who are more bought into these tools just by default. But it feels like there's more openness now. There's more planning and getting serious about where the gaps are going to be. Are you seeing some of that? Are you seeing that shift in the last 6 months or so?
Totally. I've talked to superintendents. We have conversations with superintendents and chancellors across the country, talk to CEOs and executive nonprofit. It's part of their conversation. When we first started talking about AI, we would kind of introduce it into the conversation. Like, hey, so what are you thinking about AI? What are you doing? They're like, what? I haven't thought about it much. Now, within the last 6 months time frame, it's like, we were wondering, can you give us more information or what are you hearing? Like, they're coming to us. Like, here's what we're doing. Here's some of the process. I even had one of our superintendents say, we're talking to our board about it. How do we not make it something new, something crazy, but how do we integrate it? What should we bring in? What other resources can we find to help support this work? And that's a monster shift. Public education, and everyone knows this isn't some news flash. It's historically slow to change. It just doesn't. University systems a little bit more, but even then, it's kind of like, we have a system. This is what we do. But K-12, historically slow. So to say that you have leaders who are having the conversation, who are reaching out for information, who are coming to Salesforce and saying, hey, can you bring us together? Need us because we're so busy, our lives are so engulfed in what we're doing. We need that access to information. I think is a huge shift. And I've gone through major reading shifts and major changes in the landscape of education, seen it over 30 years, just major overhauls. And it was always very, very slow to even have a conversation. So when I am hearing and they're doing the outreach and them reaching out and asking for this information, it's just very, very powerful. And that's, that's another point of encouragement because if leaders in this space will not do that, nothing will change. It's the people will hate hearing, it's top down, it should be bottom up. Yeah, it's true. But at the very top, they're gonna have to make a decision and they're gonna have to cut a check and they have to get the approvals. So they're not on board. It doesn't matter what the middle and bottom wants to do. And so they need them to be the leader. They need them to change the narrative. They need them to be intentional. And they need them to be the ones who are championing the need for this and citing reasons why it's so important. I don't believe the world should just say it's the best. Okay, follow it up with a why. Why is it the best? Give me some examples. You might not have concrete because you haven't tested it. I get that. Show me some examples of areas it could be, the art of the possible. Then from there, let's pull those down in 6 months and a year. Now we can start sharing them. You're going to have outliers that are running. Let's go to those outliers. Let's let teachers, let's let leaders see those outliers, bring them back and then implement them. Because if you just say, we can't do this because you're automatically done. You're washing your hands of something that really just might need a little bit of a switch because everyone's not the same pace. I'm a big harper on that. It's not one size fits all. Everyone is going to be in different stages. The point is not to be in a different stage. The point is just to continue to move forward and not be stuck in the mud and not move at all.
Well said. I was just thinking we had a previous guest who was speaking specifically to university presidents about the intentionality piece. Like, look, if you decide that AI is not something you're going to move on, like, come out and say it. Do that. I don't think anyone's going to do that, but let's have a decision here about how much of a priority this is going to be. And it's good to hear that you're hearing that interest from leadership.
I love what you just said. And I think that's one of the gaps we have in our industry. Like, if you don't want to do it, you and your team need to have the courage to say, we don't want to do it and why.
Yeah.
And just say, And if you're like, we're investigating it, we're on the path, we'll report out, then say that. But just to leave it in this weird kind of, what are you going to do? And have people ask questions. What that does is that creates even more problems because then it creates tension. It creates people making their own decisions. Just be declarative because guess what? You're not going to please everyone.
Yeah.
And people are more acceptable with information than without. That is an absolute fact. And so I love that point which you're saying, like, President's make a statement. Even if your statement is, we don't know, we don't know. We're learning.
Right.
That's more than just saying nothing. And I think that's a powerful place to sit.
It would be refreshing for sure. Let's turn to workers. I mean, Salesforce is
Yeah.
engaged in a lot of this in many ways. Curious kind of how engaged you are on the issue of reskilling, retraining. Obviously it's very hard to predict where the needs are going to be. Are you working in that space and do you plan to be in the next year or two?
I think it's one of the biggest questions that we have to work with. I think it's top of mind for all of us. One of the things we think directly around our philanthropic funding is a whole concept of reskilling the education force. Like we really think about reskilling, providing professional development, training, and opportunity for teachers, instructors, educators to learn, first of all, what is AI? Let's start with a simple question. What is it? Then what does pedagogy look like? How do you get better? How do you learn for yourself? And then how do you provide the instruction? It's top of mind. When you think about the workforce of the future, what are the jobs? No one knows. We don't know what the jobs are, but we do know we have to start implementing trainings to skill up on some of the techniques and aspects of AI and the artificial autonomous agents that have gone from ChatGPT to Copilot to this variation of agents. Like there's an evolution that's taken place, and we're moving through this evolution. 6 months from now, there'll be another evolution because that's how fast the system's moving. So you have to reskill. How I've looked at it and what we think about it is we're working with middle schoolers and high schools in our districts and our systems. So how are we getting infusion to them through their adults or through potential nonprofits coming in, working directly with kids to give them skills and techniques around the concept of AI and these things. Therefore, as they're getting these skills at different touch points, they're then now going into the workforce 5 years down the road, 2 years down the road, whatever it might be, having had the background information to jump into it. That's going to be critical. A lot of young people, it's a real simple pace to look at. Young people today, when they're thinking about preparing resumes, the first thing they're saying, you need to create a LinkedIn profile. Okay. So young people who've gone through these skills development training, they're getting LinkedIn prepared. How do you do it? What makes it look right? What do you need? Because the workforce is saying, this is something you need for the workforce. I believe AI is going to be a piece of that. Here's a skill, here's a certification, here's a training that you need to get ready for the workforce. You might want to be a teacher and everyone's like, well, I don't need to have AI skills and training to do it. Well, no, that's not true. You need to have the proper pedagogy, understand what the curriculum that you're teaching, and have the understanding how technology, such as AI, helps to augment and support the work that you're doing. And so these are the things that'll be part of it. And we take that very seriously because whether it's reskilling our own employees, whether it's reskilling and supporting our partners, whether it's finding nonprofits that can come and do this work, it's just critical because when you don't know what the end game is, you can't wait to the end game to then start because you're already behind. So we're thinking about, let's move it forward. Let's really partner with organizations because we're not the master. We don't know. We're learning as we go. But there are orgs, their entire existence from the time they wake up to the time they go to sleep, they're thinking about this. They're really engaged in this and how to do it right. So how can we partner with them? And then how can we, in roundtables and listening sessions, bring together the different minds and learn from each other? Then how do we take that information and pass it out to our partners in the industry and in the city and get it to families and young people and adults? If we do that, we're helping to address questions that are going to come about the workforce and be ready to provide solutions and opportunities when those questions do arise.
Well, to that end, thinking about getting started now, not waiting, is there low-hanging fruit in the AI fluency and training? I feel like there is. I feel like I'm hearing from people that you can do a lot with a little. You don't have to get a PhD in this right now. Maybe not even a good idea, but the idea that you can just do some low-level training and make a lot of progress. Is that something that you all believe?
100%. I think the number one thing you hear often, and as a person who different generation of technology user, like I tell people, the thing that changed my world in technology, I learned how to type on a computer keyboard. We did keyboard typing. And I was like, computer science sounds interesting. And then I realized, that's a lot of work. I want to do computer science, but that's how you start, right? You have to engage to know where to go. Download the app on your phone, because everybody has a phone, and just play with it. Start putting in prompts. It's information in, it's not information you get out. You might start with, tell me about a great way to cook salmon. And that simple sentence will turn and evolve into something amazing that can help you do something. And you'll be like, oh my God, why didn't I do this all my life?
Yep.
It's not about having this. I have to create this 500-word essay on the history of the Chinese Empire, blah, blah, blah. No, 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 no. Start with something simple.
Yep.
How do I bake salmon? And then from there, what words and what phrases and what terms do you put into chat GPT or the different language models? Get that back, try it out. Now you're iterating and you're trying because it's a very simple thing. What do you put in, the data you put in, the information you put in is what you get out. The quality of that drives forward. So I would say the number one thing, just practice. Try it, play with it, and that'll help you move forward in the future.
Totally with you. I think that's great advice. I feel like it's not something you can really learn without trying it a little bit and seeing what's
Yep.
possible. Ron Smith, I had a feeling we would run out of time quickly, and we did. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Hello, stay tuned. You won't want to miss Ellie Bertani's take. I'm here with Ellie Bertani. Ellie, how are you?
Doing great today. Thanks, Paul.
Well, thanks for being here. I want to get right into this. Really curious to hear about the GitLab Foundation's take on this emerging space. Yeah, I heard you heard Ron's interview. I appreciate that. He described AI as a companion, kind of getting into the agentic concept here. And that's something I know you're interested in. Can you just give me a sense on how you see that playing out?
Yeah, I think there's this really interesting opportunity that we're seeing across the board of the potential of AI tools being really tailored to help individuals, particularly around things like career pathing, mentoring services, coaching services, so that they in turn can achieve better career paths, jobs, and hopefully increase income, which is what we always care about here at the GitLab Foundation. And I think one great example of this is one of our current grantees, Career Village. So, Career Village, we learned about through last year's AI for Economic Opportunity Fund. We are currently on our second year of this fund where we offer this year $3.5 million in opportunities for organizations to come and make investments in AI to really drive economic opportunity. So, Career Village was one of our first cohort grantees. And they've been enormously successful. They developed an AI coach called Coach that launched this year in June 2024 to really help students understand better their opportunities to pursue careers that fit their interests, have good job opportunities, and to really show them the path to get there through educational experiences, through services available to them, maybe if they're low income, grants that are available to them, et cetera. But really, this one on one personalized coach that gets to know them and responds to their needs. Career Village has now engaged 7,000 learners just since June 2024. They have piloted and they're really seeing results already in terms of this influencing how students are selecting colleges, how they're thinking about their opportunities for maybe non-college job training opportunities, and really putting them on paths that are different than the alternative. And a study that they've already done of their beta stage has found that 80% of study participants have found the coaching effective, and 90% actually preferred an AI human hybrid model for career coaching over just a human alone.
I'm really interested in Coach and Jared and his work at Career Village. To your point, it seems like there's a kind of early consensus emerging that hybrid model might be the ideal one. I mean, I can see the value in students' interest in an AI coach, but having that human in the loop, seems to make people a little less nervous, if nothing else. Generally, your take on that?
I totally agree. And I think it comes from a couple different reasons. One is, just the trust element. So much of what I think about, what we think about when it comes to AI is how do you ensure trustworthiness? People generally today don't feel that sense of trust yet. We're not there. And people want a human in the loop for all sorts of reasons, including bias and inaccuracies that we know exist today. But also, there can be really sensitive situations, really sensitive conversations that can come out as you're exploring both the opportunities and the real challenges that people face. And I do think there's this sense that, if really sensitive topics come up, you want a real human with real life experience, potentially someone who's seen a lot of similar experiences to your own, and that human sensitivity that can come into play that at least today, you can't find in the AI models.
Makes really great sense to me. And as somebody who consults Claude and GPT regularly for everything for how to take care of my puppy to other things, I can see the value in asking a lot of questions to AI and in a kind of private way. And I've heard that too. But I want to move on. You mentioned non-traditional pathways, alternative pathways to college. I'm just interested in how these tools that your grantees are working with might make a difference there. Just generally optimistic that that sort of pathway might get more exploration with students with some of these tools.
So, what AI is really, really good at is helping us with complexity, right? So, our society is becoming more and more complex. And as a result, it's harder and harder for us to make good decisions based on the enormous amount of variables and data in almost any scenario. And AI really can help us more quickly and accurately analyze very complex data in order to help us make better decisions. And for workers, and in particular low income workers, they often face a world in which it's very hard for them to predict what jobs are growing, what will pay them well, what educational experiences will actually get them a high paying job, what it will take to get through those educational experiences, often in a world where they may be raising a family, may not have great access to transportation, right? Really salient barriers that affect people working in frontline jobs. And I think there are a lot of exciting examples of progress in this space. So, one example that we fund today is a project called Equos. And Equus is really trying to help workers and learners make decisions around non-degree credentials. What can they choose? What is a high quality program out in a marketplace where now there are millions, literally millions of credentials possible? Everything from, a 4-week boot camp to a 6-month certificate or beyond. They're very appealing because they're shorter, they're career specific and focused. But how am I ever going to know what's good? It's not like they're the US World News Report ranking of these.
Absolutely.
And so what ECOS does, it takes real data, real-time data from state level data that's publicly accessible all the way to scraped LinkedIn profile data to really see what are the outcomes for people who have different kinds of certificates. Do these people with these certificates end up in higher paying jobs compared to where they were when they started? How much do the certificates cost? Is it worth that trade-off in time and money? Am I going to get a quality outcome? So this focus on outcomes and this ability of AI to help us sort and analyze data very, very quickly can make these decisions a lot easier for people by clarifying, in this case, what does good look like and where should I put my dollars and my time?
Well, that's obviously for a lot of what I read about the Holy Grail, what Equus is working on. I mean, I think as you started the complexity here, I mean, it's our debate over non-degree credentials is good and bad, black or white. And, I'm in Ohio and the value of short-term credentials here, according to some research, is higher than most states, but not if you're going into IT. So, even at that level, it would be fantastic to have some automated tools to give people more information they're getting now, which is not much, to say the least. Let's talk about accessibility. This is a theme this show has explored. I worry a lot as a Gen X person, who was there when the internet came around. The wealthy students knew how to use it much faster in ways that helped them a lot in their careers, and folks who didn't have access to that learning, how to incorporate it into your life. What are the roles here for governments, for philanthropy to make sure that everybody's getting access to not only the tools, but understand how they work, to look beyond the black box?
Yeah, I think this is a really important concern, particularly in a country where 9% of the US population still doesn't have access to the internet. Not only is there a concern around AI, there's a foundational level issue here that still has gone unaddressed. We think this is really important. We have some grants in this space, particularly around internet access already, but it's a growing concern in the space of AI. I have some optimism because, the younger generations are digital natives. They are picking up these tools through use of their mobile phones in particular, much better, frankly, than those of us who are more senior, I would say. But this is a space where, you hear it over and over again. I'm certainly not at all the first person to say it, but industry has been asking for regulation. and industry has been asking for public-private partnerships and investments made by the government and policymakers to ensure that low-income people who've traditionally been left behind, have access to these tools and can learn about these tools and become AI literate. I think it's incredibly important that industry and policymakers work together. Policymakers voicing the needs of the people, of the public, industry bringing that technical expertise and working hand in hand. And I think the role of philanthropy here continues to be, and my aspiration is really to be the part of the sector that seeds experiments and demonstration projects to really prove what's possible, right? I see our foundation as trying to invest in projects that maybe other funders wouldn't invest in or that the government wouldn't, right? We're willing to take risks. And hopefully some of those risks play out in some big wins that can then translate to policymakers, states, municipalities taking notice and wanting to grow those programs where they see success.
What's important work? It's always strange for me as a journalist, I'm kind of an old school journalist, to be championing what I hear are the benefits of some of the low cost or free tools from some big tech companies on AI fundamentals. I mean, I haven't done it yet, but I've heard great things about the Google 10-hour course. Generally, do you feel like the companies, they're all different, I know. I can't generalize about any of these programs, but generally are doing a useful thing by providing that sort of regularly updated technological assistance to folks to learn about the tools? Because I do.
Yeah, I absolutely do. And, you could be cynical and say it's self-serving, but, companies are made up of a lot of people with diverse ideas, having worked at big companies in the past.
Yep.
And there are lots of altruistic reasons they do these things. And they recognize, right, they want to be around for a long time. Their license to operate is only good if they're seen as a good actor in the space. And so doing these is both helpful to them, but also helpful with the broader public. Yeah, I do think they're good.
Yeah. And also they're so big that, the overall health of the American and world economy, matters to
Matters.
them as well. Let's talk about low income frontline workers. One of the areas of the last year or two that I've heard a lot of optimism that I find somewhat convincing is the skills matching of this technology to help workers learn about their skills, learn what they need to move up, and employers how to help them do that, how to just better match employees with jobs and opportunities. Generally, are you bullish on that area?
And here's why I say just somewhat, you know, let's say we have a world in which I, as a low income worker, can better articulate my skills, which is value add, right? I've had all these work experiences. It's hard for me to know how those should show up on my resume, but I want to be able to do that so that an employer, I'll stand out amongst others. I think the challenges with many of these AI tools is as soon as the tool is available to do that, it becomes commodified. And then everyone can do that. So I no longer actually stand out in relation to my peers. And I still have this challenge, which is a real challenge, that employers, at least today, are still very biased towards degrees. So, yes, it will be helpful. It certainly is a better world when I can articulate my skills based on my work experiences and life experiences. But it will still be important for me to pursue an education, pursue upskilling. That's what really matters in terms of me being able to get a good job. There are other areas that we know are critical, like social capital, like how much others have invested in me. Is my family stable? There are all sorts of factors that we know contribute to economic mobility. But simply being able to articulate my skills better and showcase them, I think will have a minor overall result compared to some of these other areas where I think it's important we continue to invest.
It's a good nuanced answer. I like that. And it's generally, I mean, I hate to ask you this, but I'm gonna. Do you think we'll start seeing that minor benefit in the next few years? Are you hopeful that we're getting close?
I am hopeful that it will make the most difference in certain industries. So my perspective on this is where industries have job shortages, that's where employers are willing to be creative and hire from different pools than they traditionally have been willing to hire.
Yep.
And I can't get enough healthcare workers. I'm no longer going to require a college degree or a high level nursing certificate. I'm really interested in a broader set of backgrounds because I need to fill jobs. And therefore, I'm willing to color outside the lines and act differently. my ongoing advice to people who work in this space is go where the demand is, go where employers are willing to act differently. And that's where you're going to start to get momentum for the skills industry and initiative, if you will, and where it will really take off. And once employers start, I don't think they're going to go back. Once they start looking at skills rather than degrees, it'll become ingrained in their companies. But I think it's going to take an industry by industry movement over time.
That makes good sense. I'm fully with you on where the biggest crisis is by industry is where you're going to see the most
I mean, you see it in
realization.
trucking, right? Like trucking is one of the areas where pay is going up because fewer and fewer people want to be truckers. And trucking companies are starting to look for talent in unconventional places, like with formerly incarcerated
Yeah,
individuals. And it's a great career path and high paying jobs and family sustaining. And there's lots of great opportunity. You see that in certain industries, but you got to know where the market is tight.
for sure. Let's talk about the potential of the technology here and public benefits. Interesting space, the idea that AI could be used to tackle economic mobility through improved government service delivery, access to public benefits. I've heard the GitLab Foundation has been active in this space. Could you kind of give us your take on that?
Yeah, we are excited about AI as a potential asset and access to public benefits and helping people navigate to get the benefits that they are eligible for through law. We have a couple of different grants in this space. One is to an organization called MRelief that some of your audience may have heard of. MRelief helps individuals across many states access SNAP benefits. So these are food benefits for people with very low incomes. And as with many government benefits, it can sometimes be very difficult to apply and then get approved for these benefits. And this has to do a little bit with how our government both legislates and sets up these programs. They can be very complex to navigate. And MRelief makes it now near instantaneous to have individuals verify using their mobile phones a lot of the personal documentation that they need to gather in order to get quick approval of these benefits. So they've built an AI tool that does this near instantaneous verification at parts of the process that have traditionally taken days, weeks, sometimes months for people to navigate through. And that's been a tremendous lift to what will be millions of people in the US system.
Fantastic.
And then just one other example, because I think this is such an area ripe for possibility. We have a grantee, Humanitas, that is working with the 211 system. So the 211 system is anyone can call up across the United States, their local 211. They're call centers where social workers help people navigate personal challenges and access a wide variety of social services and benefits that they're eligible to. But as you might imagine, there's a lot of diversity in the problems people present. And these caseworkers have to then dig through a database
Right.
by case to figure out what's the appropriate solution for this particular problem. Well, with this AI tool now, a lot of that work is done for them. So they can enter the issue, the AI will sort through massive public databases and pull out the best solutions for the particular need, which has really dramatically improved the case management time and then the throughput, right? So often people are waiting online hours and hours to get access, and now maybe it's minutes. And what a huge improvement to a really important need.
I'm not embarrassed to admit that that's a space I hadn't really thought about the potential for the tech. So that's exciting. And I think one of those things that when people start seeing those applications have a more nuanced view of the technology, frankly. And just as a quick aside, I mean, I know the work that Alabama is doing around the talent triad. It was really interesting to see this tool that the Atlanta Fed developed on the public benefits cliff to help people see, like, if I pursue education and get a pay hike, what does this mean for me? That kind of nuanced thing. It's not that easy for people. I think a lot of folks in our world don't think through that, there's two steps forward, one step back for a lot of folks, and having tools to help them understand or even to process that work could go a long way to helping a pretty bulky system.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we have to address the symptom rather than backwards into actually, can we make the legislation a little simpler? But yes, these tools, to the extent that those problems exist, these tools could be a massive time saver for a lot of people.
Yeah, the legislative kind of system stuff, that's a different show than
Ah,
this one. So,
it's a different podcast. Next time.
here's a softball, as I know you know well. Bias is a concern with AI tools. Just thinking through some of the things we've talked about, do you have thoughts about how we can ensure that when it comes to economic mobility work, that the biases don't get baked into the system to reinforce the privilege problems that we already have with these systems?
Yeah. So obviously, as a grant maker, we in this space, we care deeply about this issue. And we thought a lot about it. We are only as good as the grantees that come to us and our partnership with them in this space. So there are two ways I'll talk about this. First, of course, any grant application is related to AI. We have a whole section on ethics and bias. We ask prospective grantees, are they aware of issues around data privacy, personal data, transparency, and accountability in this space? And we ask them what their policies are and how they hope to safeguard information and protect against bias. So it's certainly a question and conversation we have with grantees in this space. And there are a lot of great frameworks that already exist to help nonprofit organizations navigate this and set in place their own policy. Microsoft, Google, AWS, all of them have frameworks that are publicly available and that we push grantees to utilize
Mm.
so that they are taking the right technical and sort of philosophical policy level steps to make sure that they are addressing these issues. The second thing I would say is, as we are now in our second and soon to be third year of working in the AI space, what's become apparent to us is there's quite a lot of work that still needs to be done on the data side. Specifically, what I mean is any AI tool, there's a lot of excitement around the tools. What can the tool do? They're
Right.
magical, but the tools are only as good as the data they're built upon.
Yep.
And in our space, that's particularly important because a lot of the work we want to do in spaces like job matching, right? Based on my interests and background and preferences, what's the best job I might go into? What might interest me? What opportunities can I pursue? A lot of that's based on data that may not exist at all today. Like your personal preference data. Has anyone ever asked you to put that in any database? A lot of it is disintegrated data, right? So you have high school level data, you have maybe college level data, you have work data. They're all in different systems, not pulled together and integrated. And in some cases, there is wrong data, right? Incorrect data. So all of these issues in the back end data are critical to address if you want tools that actually work well and give you the results you're hoping for. So we're starting to turn our attention to probably grant making in this space a little bit more so that the tools that we're really hoping will come to life are built on a solid foundation.
Well, I really like that. And I mean, obviously, that's an impossibly hard question. We could talk for hours and barely make a dent in that topic, but that you're giving folks a framework to build off of seems like the way to approach a lot of the big challenges with AI, some sort of grounding with some expertise to start making tough decisions that will inevitably change in the next few weeks and years and months. All right. So speaking of time, let's look forward and let's try to be optimistic. We're coming up to the end of the year here. If you could paint an ideal picture of how AI would transform the economic mobility space, let's pick a decade. I like that distance. What would it look like? I know that's a tough one.
Well, as I said a little bit earlier, what I get excited about and I'm very optimistic about is the potential of AI to help us, humanity, solve some of the most complex challenges that face us today. Society is becoming more complex. We need tools and support to be able to address that complexity in issues ranging as far as climate change, food production, disease management and prevention, right? More efficient and effective government services delivery, and one I'm particularly excited about, personalized education. I'm really hopeful and optimistic that these tools will provide us support to tackle some of these incredibly difficult challenges. And as I alluded to earlier, we do know the most important factors that affect economic mobility, particularly in this country. We know that your family stability matters. We know that where you live matters and ties to social capital. We know that the education you receive matters. And some, not all of these, can be addressed by AI. helping us make better decisions as we go through life. So I am optimistic about a future in which in 10 years, we see a lot more support, both from the grassroots level, individuals in their lives being able to make good decisions about what they want to do and where they want to go and how to best afford their dreams. And from a sort of more top-down level, that our most important complex government agencies, social service providers will also be able to employ these tools at scale to make better decisions on how to direct public dollars to programs and projects that actually are effective. So we at GitLab Foundation are what we consider an outcomes-focused philanthropy. We don't talk about how much money we spend. We don't talk about how many people we touch. We talk about how much money goes into the pockets of the people we hope to support. For us, that's the end game. That's what matters. All those other things, hopefully, are pointed in that direction. That's what matters. We hope for a world in which everyone else takes that same perspective, that what matters is really are people getting the economic mobility and achieving higher incomes. And with tools like these, we think that everyone will be able to start to see what's really effective and what really works. And that can really drive change at scale.
That's a surprising direction you took that. I really like it. Honestly, it feels novel to me in all this discussion about AI. I had not thought about it that way. And, so much of what I write about doesn't have scale. So I know how elusive scale can be in this work. I know how hard it is, how expensive it is, and just hadn't thought about AI playing a role there. And I think we all know that the information that individuals have to pursue their careers and what they want in their lives is just inadequate. And, I have heard a little bit about AI's potential there, but I like the way you frame that. It feels realistic and hopeful. Could you give us one last thing coming into the end of the year here? One step that the folks listening to this program, the readers of my newsletter come from education, tech, government, philanthropy, think tanks, research. What could folks like that do to make your vision a reality?
I'm going to say something that's a little boring, sad to say, but I do think is practical and real. And I alluded to it in an earlier response. Everyone's focused on the tools, the AI tools.
Yep.
I think we all need to focus on the data because that's what powers the tool. So turning our attention to where is the data coming from? How do we bring it together? Where do we fill the gaps? Because that's really critical. There's so much data we just don't have. And so the tools can't do that much yet.
Yep.
Is foundational and important. And each of us can do, right? Each of our own organizations can have clean data sets that then can feed over time into these really exciting tools. So it's not a sexy and exciting answer, but I think we're going to discover that it's becoming more and more important in the years ahead.
Most of the good answers aren't that sexy and exciting. The show often is not. And, I think a really recurring theme in the smartest folks I've talked to this year are the data is the key to all of this. So, I'm glad to hear you say that. Ellie, thank you so much for talking with me. I looked you up before the show. Obviously, I know you. So most of your background I was somewhat familiar with, but I did not know that as an undergrad, you studied neuroscience.
It's a funny, it's so interesting how that has played a role in all of my work, but in this particular.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, AI has built the new large language models are built on neural networks, which are built similarly to how we know the human brain works. And so it's been fascinating to draw upon that background a little bit as we've entered into this work and, to be able at least to somewhat understand the basis for how AI is getting developed. It's very helpful.
Well, it's a safe bet that you understood the coverage of Google's quantum computing development better than I did when reading that. That framework from neuroscience has got to help. Ellie, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks for tuning into The Cusp. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe. You can visit us at thecusp.ai. The launch of this podcast was made possible by the collective philanthropic support of the Walmart Foundation, GitLab Foundation, Cognizant, and the Kapor Center. Thanks to our supporters and to you all for listening. Catch you next time.